And we are like, okay, wait, see, do you see the message on the LinkedIn saying it's not working? No? Okay, so we're not live yet on
Oh,
LinkedIn
I
for some
see. I just
reason.
got the YouTube notification.
Okay, cool. Then we'll just go ahead. We'll have to leave
Okay, so we're
LinkedIn
not live
out.
yet. Oops.
On All right, so we are live, and that's what happens when you are live. It gets live conversations. All right, we are live. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Moms for Trans Kids podcast. My name is Dr. Lulu, and today I'm joined by my usual co-host and co-mama beast and co-conspirator, Kimmy. Hey, Kimmy.
Hello, hello.
I can.
Good to see you. Good to see you both.
Hey, girl, hey. And
Hey.
today we are joined by a friend of the, I tried to write a little write-up. I said, a friend of the podcast. I was like, is it friend? Is it family at this point? Is it family? What is it? But AC is all of the above. So I'm just like, okay, a friend of the podcast and family member. So hi, AC.
Hi, Dr. Lulu. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, this has been like long overdue in the sense that we've been wanting you to come on the actual podcast, but we have done so many things in between. I feel like you've kind of
My
been on
goodness,
this show
yes.
already.
Oh, yeah.
So I know it's Sunday and some of y'all are doing what you're doing. So we're just going to come and keep on having conversations to normalize talking about being parents of queer kids, being parents of trans kids, being trans. And in this case, we have a little cherry on top, also being intersex. So many people don't know what is intersex, what is it, what does it mean? But we have someone who's actually having lived experience, an ongoing thing, who's going to tell us a little bit about that. And then you got to go look it up yourself because we're not going to be the ones teaching you all the things. You got to learn some things on your own. But AC has finally gloriously agreed to join us today so we can talk a little bit more. AC is also an educator, a professor, so we do a lot of research. So I'm talking about real stuff, okay? So this is not like Dr. Lulu and Kimmy, no. So to get us started, hi Kimmy, how was your week?
It was wonderful. I got lots of good things, lots of change happening. So that's always energizing to kind of blend some families. So I got engaged last week, and so we're going to be kind of moving in and doing all the things. So it's been a whirlwind, and AC's like,
We're
oh,
so glad. Congratulations.
thank you.
Or as I like to say, congratulate trans.
Congratulations. Yes. So it's pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm coming to you from my new bedroom, and and so it's just a little private spot. So excuse the background. It's informal. We're moms. This is what we do. I
That's what
mean,
we
this,
do. What we
yeah,
do.
it's crazy.
And if you are, sorry to interrupt you, if you follow us on Instagram, you will see us live. See, this is something that's new for this show, and I'm still trying to get used to it. The tech really makes my heart rate go up a little bit. But this weekend, I talked to my brother who gets really anxious when he's flying, and we kind of just coach each other that it's not anything you haven't done before. So you know what? I just did it now, and guess what? Nothing happened. So if you follow us on Instagram, please come join us. Find my guests, AC Goldberg. AC, are you there as transplaining?
I am. I'm transplanting on Instagram. I'm actually trying to share the live stream now.
Okay, super. So find my guest, AC Goldberg, on LinkedIn, Transplaining on Instagram. And it doesn't look like we're live on LinkedIn because I don't know what happened to the link, but well, too bad, LinkedIn. But we are live everywhere else. So I want y'all to just fasten your seatbelts and get ready to be schooled. A lot of times we don't school y'all too much because when we have guests who have lived experience who are not educators, we don't want to overdo it, if that makes any sense. But every now and again, we get one of us who is actually an educator. We get a guest who is also an educator who I have no problems asking hard questions. So if you have hard questions, truly, about what it means to be trans and intersex at the same time and be a parent, please ask AC. So without further ado, AC, you ready to do this thing?
Oh, I am so ready to do this thing. I'm so excited. I already have like a million things to say.
Yes.
Um, I
Yes.
well, thank you for welcoming me into the space as an educator. What I always tell people in these types of situations is I want them to ask me every single question that they have, because I don't want them to leave with these questions and then inadvertently ask someone who's maybe in a vulnerable moment, who isn't prepared to educate someone right at that time. I want them to get their questions answered by someone who's intentionally putting themselves in the position of educator. Because so often when we come out, we're not trying to educate people, we're just trying to let them into who we are. So intentionally being in a position where I am an educator is really wonderful, because I feel like I can impact a lot of people, and I also feel like I can draw boundaries around when I am the educator and when I'm just the human. Um, so if you have any questions, wherever you're watching, please ask them to me. I am, yes, both intersex and transgender. I'm also a dad. And right now, I happen to be in Vermont, which is not where I normally live, because tomorrow my family and I and some friends are going to be watching the eclipse. And I'm so excited because my entire life revolves around living to the absolute fullest. I want to drink life in. I want to do everything possible. I want to give my kids all of the experiences, because I want to center our joy and our just passion for being alive, because so many people like us don't have that joy, or don't get to live, or don't get to live authentically. And it's really important to me that I share that with my family and also with everyone I know. I'm always telling them, you should go do this, you should go do something, you should go get out if you can, and have an experience. To me, having experiences is just, I couldn't picture a future when I was a kid. So to be living a future that is absolutely awesome is so exciting.
Aw.
So hold on. I want to talk to you all about being intersex. I'm going to tell you the story. I wonder if I've ever
Please.
told you this
I'll
story.
tell you what, yeah. I'll tell you what we could do. I tell you what we could do, just to kind of give it some structure. So also you kind of, I guess, put it in little boxes. Let's maybe begin from being trans and then also being intersex. As you said, we don't have a lot of guests who are educators. We have guests who are just storytellers, many of them shy, many of them afraid. But you are kind of a face for trans masculineness. So how about you tell us about being trans first and being trans mask, and maybe even trans mask Caucasian, or I'm not sure what your race is, and that way.
Ooh,
Because it's
that'd be
I'm
great.
an includer, and because I'm an includer, I'm not like, oh, only black trans voices or only, no. If it's children, maybe, but just for transness, all trans people are invisible. They're just not visible enough. So could you start from that, because that's also important that we hold space
So,
for Caucasian
well,
trans people.
I want to just kind of work backward a little bit through my intersections in order to address that, because number one, to navigate the world looking like this
Mm-hmm.
is so much privilege. And it's something that I couldn't have anticipated. And if somebody had told me what it was like, I would have been like, no, like that's not going to happen. I went from looking like, um, a typical, I guess actually I didn't look like a sort of typical, like stereotypical feminine child, but I tried very hard. I was wearing a lot of masks. I went from being perceived as feminine to being perceived as, prior to starting testosterone, being perceived as someone who looked queer to people. And this is in like the 90s and early 2000s, and people were like, mm-mm. So I went from being sexualized to shunned to having
Mm.
people look at me and say things like, how can I help you today? And the difference in experiences is tremendous. So I will tell you a little bit about my intersections to contextualize that. I am transgender, intersex, physically disabled, and neurodivergent.
Hmm.
All of those things put together place me, further from the center of that wheel of power and privilege. For any of your listeners who have ever seen that, it's a Sylvia Duckworth graphic where you think about how close you are to the center and how the people in the center hold all the power. I look like someone who's really close to that center, and I do touch it in about 6 places. There's about 12 places where you can touch it. But the other places for me are all the way at the margins of the wheel. And I have a lot of these invisible pieces of oppression within who I am, and they don't necessarily come across in how I'm perceived by the world, but they come across in my experiences with systems like institutions, hospitals, organizations, and even just in terms of like being physically accommodated as a physically disabled person. All of that plays a role in how I navigate the world. And the biggest privilege I have is certainly being white. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to have my level of neurodivergence and be trans and also be Black. On occasion, when I am giving like a live training, people will give me feedback that I'm too direct, or that I'm too passionate. And I know that if I were Black, I'd be being read as angry all the time. I know that. And I know that because I've listened to my Black friends, and I know that because I've seen bias in medical, clinical writing. My professor job, I'm a speech language pathologist. I'm actually a voice specialist. I am the world's top noted gender affirming voice specialist. So if any of you have questions about that, I have a private practice. I run a clinic at Northeastern, but moreover, I'm an educator in that space, teaching other people, specifically teaching trans speech language pathologists and trans vocal coaches how to give those services really well. Because it's really important that if somebody wants their voice to be different from what it is, that they feel that it's congruent with who they are and not just a gender, that it actually represents them. So I do a lot of educating in the medical world and in the university world. And I can tell you that the bias that comes across in things like clinical decision making and clinical writing and clinical interactions is unbelievable. And Dr. Lulu, I know that I'm preaching to the choir when I'm saying something like that to you, but those are things that I like to help people actively address. And when I think about myself and how I'm perceived and how I would be perceived if any of my intersections were just slightly different, especially the color of my skin, I think, I would really be having a very different experience of the world because of how many marginalizations I have that are not race.
Wow. Okay. It's a lot, AC. It's a lot. You said
I
I don't even know where to start.
Lord.
I don't even know where to start.
This is me.
All right. So can I ask a question, Dr. Lulu? How old were you when you went from being sexualized to shunned? How old were you going through that process?
20 and 21. Okay. And 22.
Okay. How was high school for you?
Amazing, because I had great friends and I was popular and I had absolutely no idea what my gender was. And I didn't have those social issues that were linked with queerness because I was so repressed. And I did have a very supportive friend group who didn't care that I was different. I also, I did a lot. I'm very, very productive. This is something that Dr. Lulu, also, you already know about me. I'm very productive. So I always had my hand in a lot of things. I was always talking to a lot of people. Everyone liked me. And I was so afraid to tell them I was trans when I did come out as trans many, many years later, that I kept my close friend group. They all knew. But everyone else who knew me pretty well from high school, I shut them out on social media. This is We're talking like Friendster time, like way back in the day, like pre-MySpace. I shut everyone
Right.
out. I didn't tell anyone because I was like, I don't want these people to know. I don't want them to judge me. I don't even really talk to them anymore. I don't need this. And then I showed up at my reunion about 5 years ago, and everyone was like, this makes so much sense. How's it going? Did you bring weed? And I was like, yes, I'm still me.
Because I'm
Everything is the same. Let's hang out. And that went really well, actually. That was surprising to me because I was so worried about that. So yeah, that all happened like in my early 20s, and my parents were not accepting of me. My parents very much pathologized my existence, and we didn't speak for about 10 years. During that time, I met my wife. We got married. We had our first kid. And then my parents and I opened up the door slowly and slowly, and now we're very close. It was very difficult for me to think about repairing that relationship, but now that it is where it is, I'm very glad that we've made it to the other side. And I can tell everyone right now who's estranged from a family member that you have to draw the boundaries that make you feel comfortable and safe. You have to. And if anyone is ever open to a repair, just remember to keep those boundaries until you feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, it's okay to always have a boundary. Always.
excellent.
I have a question, and there's a bad echo on my side, so I'm trying not to speak because I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Yeah,
without
there's a
echo.
delay on your side, I think, in the phone
Oh, God.
for you.
Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's a delay.
I hear the echo.
Well, let me try it this way. I think it's that link. There was that dramatic link. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's an echo everywhere. Everywhere I try. I'm gonna type my question. Yeah, yeah.
AC, can you tell us and maybe whoever's watching a little bit about what being intersex means versus being transgender?
Sure. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about what intersex means, and then I want to tell you and your audience about how I found out I'm intersex, because I think that's a really important part of my story.
Yeah.
So being intersex is as common as having red hair. Every 1 in 1,000 people-ish has red hair, and every 1 in 1,000 people-ish has an intersex condition. An intersex condition is something that makes you a little bit different than something that you would think of as a binary sex. Now, when we think about gender as a spectrum, not a binary, biological sex is also a spectrum. There are over 30 known conditions that cause people to have intersex traits. These can be differences in reproductive and endocrine systems. They can be differences in the way that our hormones kind of express themselves. They can be differences in our chromosomes. And all of those things, they can exist on their own. They can exist on a continuum. They can exist together. And what's most important is that we think about, acknowledging the fact that like biological sex is not cut and dry the way that we learn about it in high school biology. It isn't. And I am living proof of that. And what's really exciting about that is that I get to tell people my story and about how I sort of break the binary with my existence. But one thing that I want to sort of shed light on before I tell my story is the fact that when intersex babies are born, not all of them have any sort of differences that are visible on the surface. Sometimes they have differences in internal anatomy or differences that won't be expressed until they start going through a puberty, or they might never go through a puberty. They just might not look different. So they'll be assigned whatever binary sex at birth the doctor thinks they look more like. And if there's any differences in their anatomy, it is still the standard of care in North America and Canada for those babies to be operated on in infancy so that their bodies conform to a biological binary. Now, there is no medical reason, no legitimate medical reason to perform a cosmetic surgery on an infant's genitalia. And these are the surgeries being preserved in all of these anti-trans bills that are being passed around the country. They're saying, well, no surgeries on trans kids. Trans kids don't get surgery anyway. No surgeries on trans kids, but we're going to give exceptions for intersex babies. And this is very harmful to my community. What it does is creates this web of secrecy and like medicalization of bodies that don't need to be pathologized. It's very, there's obviously no consent. You can't get consent from a baby about surgery. And parents are not educated in the way that they should be by doctors. Urologists will come in, they'll come in, they'll be like, you know what? We notice she has a little bit of extra tissue. We're just gonna take care of that so that you don't have to come back to the hospital. It'll happen 3 days after the kid's born. And it's like, then the kid grows up and finds out they have XY chromosomes and they've been pumped with hormones since they were 9 years old. And that messes with people. The intersex community receives less than 1% of any funding that goes toward any education, research, or really anything else. Less than 1% of anything that goes to the LGBT community for anything goes to the intersex community. And it is the most marginalized community because of all of these non-consensual things. You want to hear my story?
No, I was saying of all of them. I'm agreeing with you. I don't want to talk much because there's echo. I don't know where the echo is coming from. I was saying is the most marginalized of all of them. So I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
It is. I mean,
most people don't even hear about it. Most people don't even know about it. I feel like I'm going to do I know they have a whole intersex week, intersex day. I don't know. Do y'all have a month? I mean, it's just nobody talks.
October 26th is the Intersex Day, and I will loop you into everything I'm doing for that this coming year. And that's an international day. The intersex community, one of the main reasons why we don't necessarily have each other is because these things are done when we're babies. And then doctors are like, well, you had a disorder, like we fixed it. You had childhood cancer. That's a common one. Telling a child they had cancer, instead of telling them that they were born with testicles. Like, I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, why would you be like, well, you had this thing that almost killed you? Like, no, you had balls. Like, that doesn't, like, none of that makes any sense. And lying to people about who they are and their medical histories really messes them up. It creates all of this stigma around it, saying like, well, this is what you should tell your future partner. And we need to do another surgery on you so that you can have, comfortable monogamous cis het sex with your future partner. These are lies being told to like 9-year-olds who and it's the most aberrant medical practice that there is, and it's all based in Dr. David Money's debunked studies from the 1970s. And that's still what's taught in medical schools. And that's why I go around talking to people in medical schools. And that's why I have these education programs to teach people that's not correct, that's not the right thinking. It's not the right framework. Those were debunked. And his primary subject took his own life. So, we can't be basing anything. A great book to read about those studies is a book called As Nature Made Him. It's been at least 20 years since I read that book, but it stuck with me. So I want to tell you my intersex story, because now that I'm a member of the intersex community and I'm meeting all these beautiful, wonderful people, it's really been very transformative. So as I was getting, kind of like into my teens, I didn't go through puberty in sort of a typical way, but I was fine. Everything was fine. I grew basically this same amount of hair on my face that I grow now. And my mom taught me how to pluck it out. And it's funny because I still have these bald spots that I know are from that. My mom taught me how to pluck out my chin hair and, look more feminine. And I was always getting misgendered, not misgendered. I was always getting properly gendered as a child. And I think one of the most common things that my mom would say was like, that's my daughter. Like, where she's a girl. And it's so funny because other people would look at me and I would be dressed in whatever I was dressed in with long hair, and they would be like, your son is so delightful. And, it just, other people could see it. And I didn't know that it existed. And my mom didn't care to see that it existed.
Hmm.
Um, so um, things were a little bit different with me, but I didn't pay much attention to that. I was, relatively happy. I, didn't really know much about the queer community. I mean, we're talking about like before Ellen even had her, stage kiss in the 1990s. I'm old. I'm 44, and I had no idea that anything was different about me. And then I went to college, I learned what trans people were, and I was like, oh, that's it, I'm trans. And like, that makes sense given my narrative. But when I was, so I am a seahorse dad, which means that I have carried children. And when I was pregnant with my first, my medical insurance made me get genetic testing because I'm Jewish to see if I carry things like Tay-Sachs, because you have to be prepared if you're gonna, have a baby that's
Bring
gonna
the baby into the
need
world.
medical attention for like a shortened lifespan. You want to be prepared for that. I went and got this testing, and I was pretty sure that nothing major was gonna come up
Right.
with me. And I knew that everything would kind of be, just fine. So I didn't really pay attention. It was a blood test. I didn't think about it. Months later, it was cold. So I mean, it was not cold. I'm sorry. I was cold. It was warm out. I was wearing a t-shirt and I was in a Trader Joe's, and I got a phone call, and I answered it because I thought that it was someone that I knew. And it was someone who identified themselves as a genetic counselor. And I was like, okay. So if I'm thinking about, it's warm out, I was in a t-shirt, my kid was born in October. So I was pretty far into a pregnancy at this point. And I had had this blood work done early in the pregnancy. I had forgotten about it. So some call says, I'm a genetic counselor calling from X, Y, and Z. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I said, sure. And then they said, I think you sound like you're out and about. Like, do you maybe want to call me back? And I was like, no, like, I'm good. Just like, what's up? And they were like, well, you carry cystic fibrosis. And I was like, okay, thank you. And, I'm just kind of listening. I'm writing things down.
Hmm.
It's funny, like this is back when like phones were less smart. So I actually like had a shopping list and a pen with me. So I start writing things down, and I'm like, how do you spell that? Like, how rare is that condition? There are a number of conditions that that I carried that were very rare. And I was like, oh, I want to know more about these. So I'm writing them down. And then the person was like, you know what, but there's something I just like, I really think that I want you to we need to have a longer conversation. I was like, no, you need to tell me right now. Like, I'm standing there, pregnant in the frozen section of a Trader Joe's, needing to know exactly what the person is going to tell me. And so she starts saying things like, or they start saying things like, well, you have a few conditions: congenital adrenal hyperplasia, as well as some partial androgen insensitivity. And I was like, okay, I'm writing all this down. I'm like, what is this? What are you saying? Like, what? Because she was like, all of these things are a type of mosaicism. And I was like, what? What? Like, what are we talking about? And like, I just didn't understand because I couldn't Google things on my phone at that time. I didn't know these words, even though I am part of the medical community. And I said, "What does this mean? Like what? Like because I thought that these were going to be things that were going to kill my unborn child. That's how serious the tone of the conversation was." And then the person says to me, "Well, all of it just means that you're whispering the word intersex over the phone." And so I said, "Did you just whisper the word intersex to me?" And this person doesn't know who I am or what I look like. I mean, this is me. Like, this is what I looked like when I took that phone call. Maybe I had, like a different haircut at the time, but like this is what I look. This is who I was when I took that phone call. I was trans at the time. I was trans when I was a child. I'm still trans now. And I was like, what is this? Why are we whispering the word intersex? And she was, so I think you have some difficult decisions to make. And I was like, I think you need education. And I just hung up the phone. I was so angry. Like, to insinuate that I would want to have a late term abortion so that I didn't have intersex children was so horrendous to me. And I wish I could talk to that person. I've talked about this moment so many times. I have no idea where they called from, who it was, what company that was. I wish I could talk to this person about the first time I felt intersex shamed,
Too
because
funny.
that was really like a formative moment for me, because I had just found out something about myself that pieced together so many things that helped me understand so much about myself. But it was a microaggressive medical interaction. And that sucked. And I would love to have a redo of that moment. But most people don't even hear the word intersex from their providers. They hear things like you have a disorder, like there's something wrong, or it's cancer. I mean, like overt lies.
Yeah, you have a growth,
So,
you have a tumor, you have, yeah.
So all of that stuff. So that was really
That's a
illuminating.
lot. That's a
It
lot even
was.
for an adult. That's a lot. That's a lot. My one question is, do you have good health insurance? I mean, I'm just gonna come out and say it.
I
Do you have?
finally do now with my
Yeah.
current job, which is great. But it's been a while since I've had good health insurance.
AC, you have someone saying, always great hearing from AC.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that. Hey,
AC Pod
Zania.
fan club.
Hey,
Hi, Zania. AC is pretty popular. AC, I
good to
think
see you.
honestly that you, obviously, there's no question that, first of all, you have lived experience, so you can talk about this forever. But I think
Hmm.
it's also fair for people who don't speak medicine, because too many of us do. I happen to speak medicine, so everything you mentioned works. I want to know what a random mother out there is going to say. Wait, my child is also has intersex. Do they also have all these other things?
So, if you know your child is intersex, the most important thing is number one, look at their medical record and see what conditions they actually have, and see what the doctors are saying about, quote, treatment. Because what we don't want to do is force our intersex kids onto things like hormone regimens that don't feel congruent with who they are. We want to make sure that we're honoring everyone's autonomy. So if you are the parent of an intersex kid who you know the kid is intersex, maybe they did have a non-consensual surgery when they were younger, but you didn't know better. And
Mhm.
I know that it feels like a lot of guilt. I know that parents feel a lot of guilt over those things. I get that. You have to release yourself from that. It's the doctors who forced you into that. You didn't know.
You
You
didn't know
didn't
what you
know that
didn't
that
know.
was the wrong thing to do. You can't
Yeah,
know what you don't know. So
yeah.
release yourself from that and move forward and support your kid now. If your kid didn't have any non-consensual surgeries, then what I would recommend doing is looking up what they have and then finding us at Interact, which is a link that I can send to Dr. Lulu.
Hmm.
Interact is an intersex youth advocacy organization, and you can get a lot of free educational resources there, and also your kid can find community, which is really important because, like I said, intersex people have a harder time finding each other than anyone else,
Hmm.
because we're told things like you have a disorder and like there's no words used, and all of the like it's all hush hush and it's a secret.
Yeah.
All of those things are really harmful. It leads to us feeling shame and stigma around having a body, and everybody has a body,
A
and
body that
everybody's
you didn't
body is
even, a
different.
body that you didn't create, a body that you didn't ask for, a body that you didn't design. It was just the body that you just got given. I
It
do
is your
want
flesh
to,
vessel.
yeah, I do want to go in and for the record mention that today a lot of physicians are now knowing better, and so we're no
It's true.
longer it's no longer customary as it was when I went to medical school in the 80s. The default was whatever is happening there, just make it into a female external genitalia. But now we
Hmm.
know that it's not only the external genitalia, also internally. It's now a disorder of sexual differentiation. Is that the new name? Is there something like that? It's a longer
It's not
name.
DSD. We don't want DSD there anymore at all because it isn't a disorder. This is a
Hmm.
very
But
normal occurrence.
what's the new name though? It may not be a disorder, I know, but what's the new name? Because today transgender is not even called that. I mean, gender dysphoria is not even called that. Like that, they're changing names, but
There
the
isn't a new
names are
name
not
in the
they're
DSM or
not
anything like
catching up
that.
as fast. Yes, they're not catching up as
There
fast with
is
the outside world. So tell us what's the new name, and then how do parents approach it? A woman who's pregnant right now, what how are they going to approach it?
So, I mean, I think there's a few different ways to talk about it. Number one, if you're a parent and you were told your child has a disorder of sexual development, find out what that is, and don't let doctors be like, oh, you know what, she's 9, it's time for the pill, because the reason why they're giving that to your child is because they want your child to grow breasts. So, and maybe your child doesn't want that. You have to learn about your kid's condition, and it's going to be hard. So you have to go in the back end of their medical record and find out exactly what it is. And if you can't, because it's all in couched language, you need to ask for a metabolic panel and then look at the words in there and Google them and find out what intersex condition your kid has. I mean, it's ridiculous that this is medical advice, but doctors very frequently, if they have not been educated, and only some have,
Only
if they haven't
few,
been
yeah.
educated in this or haven't been educated recently in this, they won't tell you directly. And they'll be like, it's fine. She can live a perfectly happy, normal life. And it's like, I know.
Yeah, the
And I
default is
want
the
to
she
know,
thing. Is that's my thing. That default to she. That's just my thing. It's just
well,
like
you know why
not
that default
everyone
is to
feels
she.
like
I
a
mean,
she.
all of those measurements, it's better to have no penis at all than a small penis. I mean, we could unpack that one for hours.
True
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's just this the same and even as a 55-year woman, I mean, you just when you in Igbo land, I'm Igbo for those of you who don't know. In my tribe, there's a saying that goes, whenever you wake up is your morning. And so by that I mean whenever you learn something, that's when you learn it. So for me, I was an adult when I learned that. And the things they're changing amidst legal messes about don't say some words and say some words and cancel some books and don't cancel some authors, and there's just such a big mess right now. This is such an entanglement phase. My
It's
prayer
messy.
is that for those who find themselves in the meat of this, find peace and find understanding and find knowledge, because there's a lot of coded language. I know that, and suddenly people's medical records just vanish. That they can't find it, because a
Hmm.
lot of things have been said
This
that
is,
cannot be
I got to
unsaid.
tell you, Dr.
I
Lulu,
know that's a mess.
this is something that I'm going through with my birth medical records.
Mm.
So, so let me tell you all about this. This is interesting. I haven't shared this publicly yet, but I will.
I didn't even know that.
I shared
I
it.
just know.
Um,
Wow.
I shared this at the Trans Harvard convention when there was an intersex panel, and my friend Alicia Roth-Weigel and I were. I invited her on stage, and we spoke together. She just released a book called Inverse Cowgirl. It's amazing, and she tells a story about her. She tells her intersex story. She was operated on as an infant. I listened to her book this summer, right when it came out this past summer, and I also listened to Pigeon Paganis' book. And Pigeon is someone who I followed for a very long time on Instagram. They are also an intersex activist who was operated on at birth. And as I was listening to Pigeon's book, I was walking. I was recovering from a hip replacement this summer. I was walking around. I was listening to Pigeon's book, and they mentioned something like, when I tried to get my birth records, I was told they burned in a fire. And
Ooh.
this is like being an intersex person. So being an intersex person is like this. I was told my birth records burned in a fire. I was told the hospital burnt down. I had this moment of like, whoa, 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 like, what is happening here? So I called Alicia and I pinged Pigeon and I was like, what? Like, is this a thing? And they were like, this is a thing. This is an
This is
intersex
the
thing.
thing.
They both said, this is an intersex thing. You're going to be told that your records are gone. So I have been on a quest to get my original birth records because I have been told certain things about my reproductive anatomy over the years that lends itself to maybe it isn't what I was like. Maybe there were other things there, but I won't know that unless I actually get my birth records. So I am hoping that this summer Although I may not be able to get to it this summer. I'm hoping that sometime soon I can get a film crew with me and go to the hospital where I was born and actually dig around and get my records released to me. I want people to see what that's like. I want people on that
Wow.
journey with me. I want people to
Yeah.
know.
That's
I
a
want to
reality.
do it
Yeah.
publicly.
That's
That's
a
a
move.
That's a reality TV right there. That would be
I
That's
just
a
want,
move.
people to, I want to share it with people because I don't feel like I should be alone. And I know that if this happened to Pigeon and this happened to Alicia and it's happening to me, that it's happening to so many other people. And if I can help one person feel like they're not alone, then I'm helping one person. And if I can help the world see that there's so many of us out here alone, then I'm helping so many people. So I want people to see, I want people to know, and I want to see what happens. I have no idea.
I have a question. How will, because it looks like a lot of people are finding out later in age. So in older age, what do you think? Just anybody walking down the street, I mean, who doesn't think that they're intersex? They don't, or maybe they suspect that they might be, or says like, wait, what if I am? What do you think? What would the first thing to do? What would that be? Is it medical records? Because it doesn't look like medical records are reliable.
Well, medical records are not necessarily reliable. I think that if you're someone walking down the street and you're like, you know what? When I was 9, I got put on birth control. And I was also told that I couldn't have my medical records. And like, I remember having a bladder surgery when I was 3 years old. What was that about? If you have a medical history like that, you're probably intersex.
Oh wow!
If and like there, 1 in 1,000 of us. Also, if
That's
you
a
are
lot.
someone who's, it's a lot.
Well, actually, I
If
think
your
it's a
hormones,
1 to 3%. AC, is that correct? 1 to 3% of the population,
yeah,
or is it more?
yes,
Because
1
as
to
you know,
3%.
every number that 1 to 3% is only those that we know.
No,
But if
yeah.
there's all kinds of fires burning medical records, then maybe there's a whole lot more people out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Intersex Fire is a big lie, and it's one that's sold to all of us. And you know, I was actually told that the hospital burned down.
Oh my.
And what was amazing is that like in that moment while I was listening to that book, I remember where I was. I remember where I was standing. I remember where I stopped. I remember, you know, the immediate text and phone calls. And then the first thing I did was Google that hospital. It is still standing. I tried to Google if there was a fire. I didn't see anything on record.
Oh my
It's still
God.
there. Like
Wow.
what? Like,
That's
and it was.
nerve, man. That's some nerve.
I just, it's so funny because the reason why I actually originally wanted my birth records was before New Jersey. So now New Jersey is a really easy place to change your birth certificate gender marker. Before New Jersey was an easy place, they wanted me to have like some records from the hospital about my birth, and I couldn't get them. But they settled for like what I did have, and they did help me, and I did get to change my gender marker from an F to an M on my birth certificate. But it was like that was before it was sort of like cut and dry. And I remember just being in touch with them and like getting these emails from, you know, from people and just being like, I can't provide what you're asking for, but I can provide all of this. And the state was like, that's totally fine. We're going to change it for you. But that was when I was sold that lie. So, I mean, the hospital burning down? Like, I mean,
Where
I
are
just,
we in the middle of? Are we in the middle of like, I don't know, some random remote desert? How you gonna tell that kind of lie? It's not even sustainable. There's the internet now. Like you just
I
can't
know.
tell certain lies.
But you know what, Dr. Lulu? I didn't think to question it. I
I'm
was like,
sorry,
oh, that is
yeah,
such a
Macy.
bummer. I
I'm
wonder
so
how to get
sorry.
around all of these. I wonder how to get around all these barriers if I can't get this information. I'm just gonna get around them. And I didn't think about it.
You know what I'm thinking? This is all this trauma on top of the trauma of just even being intersex, and then the trauma of being transgender, and then the trauma of, because I happen to know what all the other things you said. I mean, I don't even want to repeat them because those are your personal diagnoses. Any one of those diagnoses is a lot for one person. And then you have, I don't know what, 5 of them I was counting. That's just a lot. I
Hmm.
think I think I want to ask people to please just learn to be compassionate and be kind. You truly don't know what somebody's story is. I mean, AC, I've never met you, we've never met you, we've been praying to meet you someday, but I just kind of imagine that you're just walking down the street looking like a regular guy. I want to use that in air quotes, but really, truly, just a little scratch. And there's all these things that you're dealing with or that you've had to deal with. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it because it's true. I'm almost thankful, as you said, that now you're able to walk in and people ask you, well, how can I help you? And so people are like nicer and kinder to you. But, if you were not Caucasian looking and you had all
That
these
would not be the
things,
case.
where will you be? And this is why one of the
Dead.
things that Kim and I talk about is the high rate of mental health just issues going on in the queer community without adding anything else. That's just, I don't know, Kimmy, how are you feeling with just hearing all this? Because that's a lot. That's a lot, AC. I thought I knew you, but I mean, there's a lot more that you're dealing with. I mean, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Kimmy,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
Well, your story is amazing, and I'm about to Google Earth that hospital and get a snapshot because I can't imagine being on the phone with somebody and saying, "Yeah, I can't get your records. The hospital burned down." Like, bitch,
That's
I'm looking
legitimately
at
what
it on the
happened.
computer.
I
Like,
know.
That's legitimately what happened.
Oh,
that's
Barnard Hospital,
crazy.
that was
Barnard
really
Hospital
And
in
my mind is
Princeton, New Jersey.
my mind is still blown like that.
cool.
It burned down. No, it didn't. There's
No, it didn't.
no police record, nothing. It didn't. And also, like, wouldn't my record have been digitized? It was just like one of these things that it was a weird phone call that happened in like the early 2000s. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do this a different way. I didn't think to question it. And as all of these things add up to intersex stories, and as more of us put them out there,
Mhm.
like listening to Alicia's book, listening to Pigeon's book, being connected with these people, talking and being in community, and realizing that like this is the intersex experience. It is so important that if you are a parent to intersex children, like I am, because as the very insensitive genetic counselor told me, it was dominant, and that I had some difficult decisions to make. All the most difficult decision that I probably made that day was to feel empowered with that information and not to feel upset or agitated at the microaggression, but to feel like I now know something about myself that I wouldn't have known. I know something about my kids that I wouldn't have known. And now I'm going to know better how they should interact with a system that wasn't designed for them,
Yeah.
because I know more about them than I ever knew about myself. And that was a big moment and a big day. But the problem with being intersex is kind of like it's a cascade of days like that, where you just
Yeah.
keep finding out little bits and pieces about yourself. And it's a very fractured way to come into self-actualization.
I can't even imagine that, or rather, I can imagine that there are lots of other intersex people in other parts of the world. I'm not talking about US now. If US is telling people stories about fires burning, what is happening in other parts of the world? That
These
said,
surgeries are banned.
they are
Surgeries
being
are
done.
banned.
Yeah.
They are being done. I don't know. I mean, I know that they're illegal in most of Europe and South America, but I don't know. I mean, I also know that genital mutilation is common in some countries. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I went to medical school in Nigeria. I can say for Nigeria that genital mutilation is a thing. I have a very, 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 very close family member who had genital mutilation who never knew. I think they never know. And then I had a classmate in medical school who did not know that they did not have a clitoris. They did not know. It was during our OBGYN rotation that she found out in medical school.
That must have been
So
so
there's a lot of
difficult
things
for her.
happening. And she was like, wait, I don't have that. We're like, what do you mean you don't have that? She's like, I don't. So what do you mean you don't have that? Let's see. Yeah. We went, I was like, you don't have it was crazy. That said, one of the reasons why we do this show is to really hear parents' stories And as much as possible, we try not to talk about our children on the show. But AC, you have mentioned your children on the show, and you get to tell us as much as you want to. What is that like, having the next generation? And maybe what are your questions about the generation before you? Could this also have been maybe your parents? I mean, how have you
Well,
navigated your
I
parents
mean,
being carriers, having the disease, not the disease, having the also being intersex, let me put it, because not a disease, and then now your child. So you have potentially three generations. How have you navigated the generation after you? That's the one I want to know, because we're talking
well,
about being parents here.
I mean, it's interesting because for me, the care that my kids have received has never been anything but affirming,
Mm,
and will never be anything but driven by what they want for their bodies. And that is how every single parent, whether your child is cisgender or transgender, intersex, anything like that. I do want to make sure that I circle back to the differences between being intersex and transgender, for listeners who maybe don't understand the medical elements of these things. But what's most important to me is that um, I feel like I can lead my children and their peers and other people into a place where these things are not stigmatized. Because my mom teaching me how to pluck out my chin hairs, so now my beard
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah.
mm,
is missing a lot of what I would feel very affirmed with having. Um, Now, all of the things that I did to sort of obey the binary as per my
mhm.
parents, they left like permanent marks on me
Yes.
in like on the surface and deep, and those things, if I can take that away from my kids, I'm going to, and I hope that I am. And that being said, when I think back on the generations before me, and I look at my family members and I look at pictures, I can see this for some of them. I mean, I know that they were very rigidly forced into binary roles. I know that.
Mhm.
But I also, I will send you a beautiful portrait drawn by my great aunt, that is 100% of a trans woman. And my parents have it hanging over their piano. And I have brought this up with them many times. And I'm like, this is very obviously a trans woman. And they're
Yeah.
like, it is not. And I'm like, I know what I'm looking at. And I also
Mhm.
know who my great aunt was. And I know that she was the person who um, was seen as, more masculine and large and strange and never had children. And she's producing this beautiful painting. This
Mm,
is what I'm seeing. It's not what you're seeing. And I think that even just having that lens, that I can go back through like bits and pieces and moments in my family's history and be like, you know, like
mm,
why? Why are there so many people in my parents' families who were not able to have children?
mm.
That was not
Oh
as
wow!
common
Because
back then.
you did say it was a dominant. You said it was a dominant
Hmm.
trait. I want
Hmm.
us to, before
And
we go, AC, if you
sure.
don't mind. There's one question that I think I know. Kimmy and I, being in our Facebook group, we get various versions of this question, low key asking this question a lot, and that is, you said something earlier about your children and what they would want. And with all due respect to the fact that we're not talking about your children, this is a question about children in general. What about when parents say, well, I don't think my child is old enough to know what they would want for their bodies? Again, this is Dr. Lou asking it in the space of just an interviewer.
Just a
It's not my
hypothetical.
opinion. And it's
I
important that
mean,
a different person is answering the question. That's not me or Kimmy saying, well, your kid, no, no. What about
so
saying, because you
here's my
mentioned
take
that
on that.
about your children specifically, what would you say about to parents who might question their children knowing what they want for their bodies? Say in the context of the
So
testicular cancer thing.
my thing with parents who say that, my child is too young to make these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, you can't make those decisions for them either.
Mm.
And if you are going to say, you can't have puberty blockers, which are harmless, because you're too young to know that you want them. If a child wants to delay their puberty, or if a child wants to, be called a different name or use a different pronoun, the only thing you're going to do by pushing against your child is damage your relationship. We don't want to damage our relationships with our children. We want to lean in and listen. And that way you make space for your kid to be like, you know what, I changed my mind. I thought I wanted to go by this name and that was wrong. I want to go back to my other name. And you say, I love you, whatever name you're using. Let's try that out and see how it feels for you. What we want to do is approach our kids with the most openness that we possibly can have, because the only thing that we can do is accept them for who they are and accept them no matter what. And I want to talk to the parents of autistic kids for a second. It's April. It's Autism Awareness Month. This is a tough month for us neurodivergent people, because it's like everyone's like, I am aware of you, but there's no actual understanding of like what neurotype is and how it's not a tragedy, and everyone has a neurotype.
Yeah.
And just like white people don't think about their race and cisgender people don't think about their gender,
Yeah.
neurotypical people generally don't think about their neurotype.
Nope.
Imagine if there were a stigma associated with your neurotype that made people feel like it was a tragedy. And that is how people associate being trans with that's a tragedy. People associate being autistic with that's a tragedy. These are just facts about people that just exist out there. If you are autistic or neurodivergent in any way, you are 7 to 10 times more likely to be to express gender variance. Recent study by Chris Bonello that surveyed 7,500 autistic people found that 55% of them identified as queer in some way. I'm going into a special interest rant. Do we have time for that?
We do have for maybe 3 more minutes.
Okay, I can get it out there. I can get it out.
Well,
so
let's
listen,
go.
Do it.
Parents, if your kid is autistic, you're likely invalidating them at every turn, even though you don't mean to. The kid says it's too bright in here. You say, no, it's not. You're too sensitive. It's too loud in here. No, it's not. I can't even hear it. You're too sensitive. This food is touching each other. It doesn't matter that the food is touching each other. You're invalidating your kid by mistake over and over and over again because you don't understand their sensory experiences. And then you're expecting this same child to trust you to say, you know what, Mom? I'm not a boy. And then you're going to come back and say, yes, you are. You're just autistic. You're confused. This is a behavior. This is how society treats autistic people. So this April,
I love that. You know what? Oh, AC, wait, hold up. Here's my show. I want you to say that. No, for real. I want you to say that to those at the back. I think you said something here that I don't know that I've heard being put that way before. So not to cut you short, but it's important that what you said is true. We invalidate, and all of a sudden, oh, well, actually, you know what? It's because you're autistic. You know what I'm like? We're saying we're using it when it suits
it's convenient.
Yeah, when it convenient, that's the word. So first of all, and I started snapping because my eldest has for long suspected that she is probably neurodivergent. But what you said just now is so true. When she was younger, once the food touches each other, she's not going to eat it. I don't care how starving she is. She's not going to eat it. And she doesn't want her food in, just say it again.
I mean, there are all sorts
Please say it again, because that is so important for all of us to learn. I thought where you were going was, you're probably neurodivergent yourself. I thought that's what you were going to say to the parents. Like, a lot of times when our kids, where did our kids come from? They didn't just come from outer space. They came from us. And I started asking myself the same thing. Maybe I am. Oh my God, maybe I am. So I thought that's where you were going, but where you went was even better. But still, both of them. Yeah.
I mean, but that's true also. It's funny because I could have spent the whole episode and probably should have talking about autistic trans kids, because it's such it's the right month for that topic. And
come back and do it.
Yes.
That would be fun. And I will. And I think that what's very important for everyone to know and understand is that even if you are like, I'm autistic and that doesn't mean that you haven't been invalidating your child, and it's because of the things that society has told you that how you should behave. That's the same thing with cisgender people and how they invalidate their kids' gender because society has told them to conform to this binary. Autistic people are also told, you can't act like that, you can't move like that, you can't have experiences like that, you can't be like that. And when we think about that through the lens of a parent, if we've been taught that ourselves, we're going to teach that to our children. This is the same way that toxic masculinity is passed down in generational trauma, and all of it is linked and interconnected. I can't think of a better note for us to hit 60 minutes on. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
I love that. I think the listeners and the viewers will want you to come back. What about Kimmy? Kimmy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think AC just broke the binary. So I'm ready. I'm ready to continue the conversation. I could talk to you for another 3 hours and hang out with you, by the way. I think you're cool.
That'd be so fun.
And you remind me a lot of my oldest son's demeanor. And, myself and my youngest son and a little bit of my oldest son, we're neurodivergent family. So we're just,
Us too. And
so we're all family,
tomorrow we will be viewing the effects with another neurodivergent family.
I'm so happy to hear that, because one of the things that I want to do is just normalize conversations that ordinarily we'll be running away from, we would not want to normalize. So I'm happy that you did that. AC, how can people find you and follow you? Because we have to get that in. And then you have to follow me. My handle on Instagram is Transplaining. And actually, I've now brought Transplaining, which was a consulting business, into my nonprofit, which is called the Credit Institute. And I've recently patented a housing extension for colleges to use in order to house trans people safely. Where it's been piloted, it has shown a 22% reduction in domestic violence across all of the campuses averaged, and a significant reduction in attrition in first-year trans students, as well as a almost full reduction in rehousing requests by trans students. And it also addresses an equity issue in that trans students aren't forced into a single, which costs more money, or in all gender housing, which is segregation. So you can find me. That's called the Safe Trans Housing Extension. You can find me. You can Google that and find me on Instagram. I am all about making the world a better place. I'm going to show you my shirt, which is hard to do because I'm sitting in this chair. It says, "Let's be better humans." And I really, really want for us to all live up to that and be better, because we can be. The world doesn't have to be what it was. People are so attached to this, like, toughen up. When I was a kid, it was so hard. It doesnn't have to be like that. And it's not even
we can make the world a better place.
It's not even true. When I was a kid, it was tough. Let's quit making it look like it was all easy. It wasn't. AC, it's been amazing. I love what you said about rehousing requests, because my kid had a rehousing request. So everything you're saying, and when
it's so stressful.
These
college kids, they go through so much stress, they don't need to.
Yeah, yep. I love it. And she absolutely hated going to Stanford. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Stanford? She was like, Mom, it's terrible here. But it was the little things. It was the little things. So AC, thank you so much for coming. Kimmy, what do you want to say before we get out of here?
Well, just, thank you, AC, for spilling a lot of knowledge and a lot of resources and a lot of experience coming from somebody firsthand. Like, this is and such a genuine human you are. I don't know, just thank you for everything. And, if there's any way that I can support you, my family can support you in any way, share your information, we will do so. You're part of our family now.
Extension.
I will talk about safe housing extension when I do my little spiel afterwards. But I'm a member of a Facebook group for doctor moms whose kids are going off to college. So I'm going to mention that there.
Send the link. There's articles being written about it. I mean,
send me the link and I'll send it to you.
I'll send them all to you.
And then
thank
also,
you so much for having me on your show.
I freelance write for college something, I forget the name. I've written 2 or 3 articles for them. So I'll write something about this and see if they want You never know. But yeah,
Never
college
know. And, all I'm trying to do is keep people safe. A lot of colleges are like, it's too late. We can't do this for the fall. But the way that the extension is engineered is that it can go into a housing survey at any time, and it can alert users to, like, via email saying, a question has been added to your survey. Because roommate pairs aren't set yet. I mean, decision day usually isn't until May 15th, and then roommate pairs are not set until everyone turns in their surveys. So there's still plenty of time. If you're someone who's like, oh my gosh, how does my child's college get that? Just contact me, hit me in the Instagram inbox of Transplaining, and I will send you information. And this is really something that anyone can use, and it's such an easy solution. It's a tier 1 violence prevention tool,
Yes.
which is extremely important from a public health perspective, because housing, as we know, is a major social determinant of health.
And y'all, AC has a nonprofit. Please, if you have any spare change, please do go help out. It's called Safe Trans Housing Extension, right?
That's in my nonprofit is called the Credit Institute. If you
the
Google me,
Credit.
it'll come up.
Okay.
I've over the years had a lot of different businesses and have had to kind of merge them. So that's where this is housed. And I am hoping to house your kids safely as they go off to school, because everyone deserves to feel safe and comfortable in the place that they live. And we don't want kids going from, a kid going from a non-affirming home to a non-affirming doormate, or from an affirming home to a non-affirming doormate. I mean, it's all a nightmare. But thank you so much for having me on the show. I want to make sure that I honor everyone's time, and I'm going to go check in and see what my kids are up to. Next time I see you, I won't be at this beautiful Airbnb in rural Vermont.
Well, listen, enjoy the eclipse tomorrow, and everyone enjoy the eclipse tomorrow. Kimmy, thank you for joining. AC, thank you so much for joining. Everyone, thank you for watching. Especially on Instagram, I just couldn't access it. I don't know what was happening today, but I was seeing people joining, but I couldn't access it. All right, folks, have a wonderful week ahead, and don't forget to be kind to yourself and each other. Yes, I copied Ellen DeGeneres, but I can. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, Kimmy.
Bye.